It was a full physical abduction. So it was around 3 a.m. and I woke up. You know how you're in a new place and you kind of forget where you are at first. So I woke up. I was like sort of delirious. I'm like, where even am I? And there was a being standing over me. And just like that, I saw this sort of head lingering over me. And then I was being taken from my room. There was three of them, one on my left foot, one on my left arm, and then one on my right arm. And I could see my right leg just sort of dangling. They took me into the hallway of this meditation retreat center.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders who are helping our world awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I want to share with you a mind-blowing conversation with Elizabeth April. You can literally hear my brain exploding. This woman is amazing. She's a psychic intuitive, a clairvoyant, and a remote viewing expert. And I got to tell you, I had to join her online membership program because I just had to get access to like the million videos that she puts out talking about the most amazing things, from extraterrestrials to conspiracy theories to remote viewing Kate Middleton and seeing what's going on behind the scenes of her life. You are going to love this conversation. We talk about how she was abducted by aliens in a conscious state and went to a trip not only to the moon, but inside the moon. And she tells us what she saw. We talk about the 7 different types of soul missions that she writes about in our best-selling book. And I also asked her, hey, if somebody's confused, kind of concerned about, like, why are they here on this earth? What is their purpose? What would you say to them? If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Awaken Magazine podcast. We release the episodes on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Click subscribe, rate, and review the show. That's a way that can help us spread the word to more possible listeners and viewers. And of course, share it with a friend, because your mind's going to be blown by this conversation. My mind was blown, and your friend's mind's going to be blown. So share it with a friend. They're going to love it as well. All right, let's jump into our conversation with Elizabeth April. Elizabeth, it is great to see you and great to be with you. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, likewise. It was so nice actually meeting you in person.
Yes, that was great at Conscious Life Expo. Love
Mhm.
that event. Okay, so I love to get people hooked with a question that is relevant right now before we dive into your backstory. And that is, there's a lot going on in the world, especially in the United States right now, where you and I both live, but also what's going on in the United States impacts globally, of course.
Mhm.
What do you sense is happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's a transition. That's probably the best word to use right now. We are transitioning from one state of being into another, both individually and collectively. And in order to make this transition happen, we need to release or let go of the old systems, old energies, old attachments, old patterns, old programming, old expectations. I mean, anything that is no longer in harmony to the new energies that we're transitioning into is phasing out right now. And I think that, in a really interesting quantum way, all timelines exist. So technically that future state of being is already existing. Um, and so we have to do a lot of work individually before we transition into that collective new state of being. And then I think the collective is going to take a little bit more time and energy to shift into that new state of being because the systems are so rooted. So I would say that in one word, what is happening right now, both in America and the world, is there's a transition taking place. And whether you are spiritual or not, you're feeling it.
How would you suggest people navigate that, who probably, if they're watching this, they're awakened to some level of consciousness, spirituality? How would you encourage people to navigate this? Because
Mhm.
obviously there are people who are watching that are politically maybe more far right and then far left.
Yeah.
People are all over the spectrum. And so some people are cheering and some people are grimacing and in depression. And
Yeah.
how do we navigate all this?
hmm So there are a couple of different tools that I've been channeling and bringing in recently that will and are helping people. And one of them is actually called vibrational navigation. So essentially what that is the ability to consciously connect and consciously disconnect from elements in our reality, right? Now we do this every day. When you go to sip your hot coffee in the morning and you burn your tongue, you're connecting to that moment. You're almost forced to connect to that moment because there's pain involved or a reaction or a sensation that sort of takes us out of that autopilot programming. So every single day we are connecting and disconnecting. The problem right now is that we are being so almost infiltrated with external stimuli, information, fear. There's all of these things that are happening, not to mention all of the people that we love in our life are also going through some stuff and they're also feeling stuff. And as an empath and a sensitive, what we're doing is we're taking all of that on, right? So to be able to show up and consciously say, hey, I'm talking to my neighbor. So I'm going to consciously connect with my neighbor right now. How is she feeling? What can I help her with? Where is she at? How can I relate? What am I taking from this, conversation? And what have you, right? And then to be able to walk away and say, okay, I'm not going to take that energy on. I'm not going to walk into my house and bring my neighbor's energy with me. So I'm going to consciously go ahead and disconnect. That could look like saging. That could look like, working with some crystals. That could look like, for me, it's visually cutting the cords, right? I believe that we create entanglement, energetic entanglement with every aspect of our reality. We even have energetic entanglement with that cup of coffee that we drink in the morning, right? So to be able to connect is great, but we are so overstimulated, so overconnected that we end up feeling extremely anxious and overwhelmed. So to be able to disconnect from elements, frequencies, people, energies, emotions in our reality is so, so needed and so important. And
Mm.
all we have to do is bring our conscious awareness into it. How am I feeling? What's going on? What have I taken on? What do I need to let go of, right? Having that internal conversation with yourself goes a long way.
hmm Here in Southern California, we're near the beach. A lot of people have outdoor showers, right? Before you go. Uh, I think it's like a spiritual, energetic outdoor shower before you go back in the house. After you connect
Yes,
with your neighbor.
absolutely. Exactly.
Hey, I want to go back to your own story of awakening to mindfulness, consciousness, spirituality. Tell me about your growing up years. Did you grow up
Mhm.
with some sort of faith or spirituality or?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a journey. So I'll kind of give you the Coles notes, or the American version, the Cliff Notes. I think it's Coles and Cliffs. Um, so the short version is, when I was born in this lifetime, I was born with extrasensory abilities, which I believe we all possess, we all have, and so that allowed me to be extra sensitive, to feel into people's emotions, which brought a lot of anxiety, of course. And then I'm also very clairvoyant, which means that I can see chakras and energies, and auras, and I can also see ghosts and spirits and other things like that. So my parents told me that I was talking to things that they couldn't see at around the age of 2, right?
Wow.
Interacting with things that even my brother, who was a year older, just wasn't. Um, and so that sort of started things. I would go over to my friend's house and see their grandpa. And I'd be like, oh, it's so nice that your grandpa's here visiting. And they would be like, oh, my grandpa passed away, 4 years ago. Right. So that was sort of my childhood up until around 10 years old, because at that point I had imaginary friends. I was the weird kid. I didn't have a lot of, real friends. And it was hard to sort of fit in. And, my dad was very open. He was actually Catholic. So we were raised Catholic. And for a very long time in childhood, I wanted to be a nun. I felt like I was talking to God. I felt like I was a messenger for God's information. And so I wanted to commit myself to that, to being God's messenger, which is kind of funny because, in a sense, I'm kind of in that position without the framework, And so my dad he would record me on a cassette tape, and he would be like, okay, Elizabeth, if you had $1 million, like, what would you do with it? And I'd be like, I want to fill jumbo jets full of food and I want to fly it over to Africa and like feed the hungry children. And he would ask the same question to my brother. And my, of course, 8-year-old brother would be like, I want to buy $1 million worth of ice cream and like eat it all. Right. So there was definitely a difference that my dad could tell, which was interesting. And I love my brother. Now, my mom was really freaked out, right? She wasn't necessarily Catholic, and she was quite worried when I said I wanted to be a nun. She really didn't want me to throw my life away.
She wanted
Uh,
grandchildren.
yeah, exactly, right? So so I would tell her that I was seeing ghosts and spirits around, and she would tell me, "Oh, you were just watching too many scary movies." So that sort of discredited. My dad would ask me questions about what God was saying, and then my mom would, sort of say, "You're just making it up," right? So I had two different sort of conflicting views. So I ended up suppressing all of my abilities at 10. That's when I got really heavily involved in sports, which really helped me anchor into my human. And so talk about going very metaphysical to very physical. And I flourished in that environment as well. But spiritually, I was completely disconnected. All of a sudden, I felt like I was trapped. And so around 14, 15, 16 is when I went into a deep state of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of questioning. Who are we? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of life? Because honestly, if we're here to go to school, go to more school, get into debt, pop out some kids, and then die, count me out, because that's just not the life for me. And I remember at 16 going everywhere. I went to school counselors. I went to my friends' parents. I even went to a priest to say, okay, you're the authority figure. You're the guy in charge. You're the connection to God. Like, tell me what the purpose of life is. And every single time I was just disappointed. No one seemed to have the answers. And so, oddly enough, my engineer Catholic father also did a course in past life regression. And so at 16, he said, hey, this is going to sound weird, but I know you're searching for answers. Would you like to have a past life regression? I didn't know what to expect, but I said, I will take anything at this point. I just need to know. And so in an hour and a half, we went into about 4 or 5 different lifetimes. And all of a sudden, my entire reality was shattered, right? I was a healer. I was a shaman, right? It was usually in a position where I was gaining access to external insights, information, and then helping people with it. But for me, what that meant was A, reincarnation does exist. Thank God I'm not just 16. That's what I really felt. And B, time doesn't exist in the way that we've been taught. So, what exactly is time if it's not linear? So, I ended up taking my dad's past life regression notes, copied them into my own notebook, and went 2 years later, when I went away to university, that's how I made friends. I would ask people if they believed in reincarnation. And then without any training, which was so irresponsible, I would take people into past life regressions, and we would just explore lifetimes together. And then at 18 was when all of my abilities came back online. So at a certain point, I asked myself, can I expedite past life regression? Because at this point, it was taking 60, sometimes 90 minutes to get someone into a trance-like state, to remove their ego from their present moment so that we can actually go somewhere, and then another hour or two of exploring. So I thought to myself, am I able to regress myself into a trance-like state and explore someone else's Akashic records? Once again, completely untrained. And I was able to do this. And not only was I able to look into someone else's past lives, I was able to look into my own past lives. And not only that, I was able to get out of my body and start exploring past history on planet Earth. I started remote viewing, essentially. And then shortly after that is when I got abducted by extraterrestrials. And that, once again, boom, opened up a huge can of worms of, okay, I've never really thought about aliens before, but I just got abducted. They are definitely real. They are here. so who are they? Why are they here? What do they want? And why would such an advanced civilization even bother with this low level sort of caveman type species here on planet Earth? And then I started doing past life regression into extraterrestrial lifetimes, and it got weird after that. So I'm 32 now. That was when I was 18. It's been over a decade of diving in and exploring and being curious and asking questions and meeting interesting beings and gaining access to interesting insights. And that's my story.
My goodness. One of the things that stands out to me is your age at which you started engaging in some of these subjects, because it seems like so many people in the spiritual community are, a bunch of old farts. Uh, right? People like me in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and this something came online for you so early.
Mm-hmm.
I assume you've reflected on this quite a bit. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
So funny enough, like, there are these like waves, right? Of like galactic volunteers, starseeds, whatever you want to call them. And I really think I'm just one step ahead because right now, when we take a look at the kids being born, they are exactly how I was, except now we have the resources. Now we have information. Now we have a lot of books that have been written on these things. Um, and I think that I needed to go through all of that solo for the most part so that I could utilize my own discernment, my own navigation abilities, without having to rely on external information. So I don't think that my story is unique. I think in even 10 years from now, I'm just going to be one of many who are all stepping into the same roles. But I also believe that I needed to come in just a little bit ahead of this new generation of volunteers. To help guide them as well, because discernment is so key. And I do think that there's so many people, adults coming online right now saying, I'm channeling the Pleiadians or whatever. And that's really beautiful. But they also haven't gone through the trenches of the darkness and the duality. And so they may not have the built up discernment in a sense. So I feel like I'm here to sort of expedite training that took me many, many years to work on myself solo and to expedite others to be like, okay, you're stepping into your abilities, but these are the things that you really need to know in order to navigate them appropriately and then therefore help the world with them.
Hmm. I have a line of questioning that I want to go down to help people understand more about your views of the world and planet and your experiences.
Mhm.
I just cannot wait to ask you all these questions. But one of the things that you just brought up was the duality, experiencing that you said duality. I have a sense of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that there are people who are channeling, different entities, and yet perhaps, I don't know, they have different experiences. I found just being at Conscious Life Expo just recently that in attending several panels and seeing different channels and so forth, that some resonate with me, like yourself. I go, ooh, like we talked in the hallway,
Yeah.
and you're so nice. You just feel so genuine and like connecting, and like, I don't know. I just was like, wow, what a great person. And then there are other people that I go, oh, I don't know. The channeling or something doesn't quite feel quite right. And it doesn't
Hmm.
quite, some feels honestly even like darkness.
Hmm.
And then others feel like, oh, they're exploring. They're still trying to kind of figure things
Yeah.
out. Right.
Hmm.
And I think I have been told by others outside of me, uh, they're not inside of me, that I do have a level of discernment that
Yeah.
seems to be like I can kind of see, like, right. So, how do you navigate that in a context like Conscious Life Expo, where you go, all right, I'm on a panel with a lot of different people at a lot of different levels of different, I don't know if levels is the right word, different stages of their
Hmm.
journey.
Yeah.
And you obviously have a profound platform where you're having a lot of influence with people. How do you navigate that with other people that are, like you said, I'm channeling the Palladians, and
Hmm.
how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So when I was younger, so when I was 16, my spirit guides came through and told me that I'm not to do any external research on these topics, right? So I don't watch UFO documentaries. I don't listen to other channelers. I've never read a spiritual book in my life for the reason of, if I'm already battling my own 32-year-old or 18-year-old perception, I don't want to add in more layers of perception to navigate through. So I can't speak much to where other people are at or what they're saying, right? For that reason. However, I was on a panel at the Conscious Life Expo, and it was a Galactic Federation panel. And at the end of this panel, they're like, okay, we're going to give you all a gift, and this is going to be a gift of activation. And so people, the panelists started going into light language and opening up portals and stargates and working on chakras. And I'll be honest, I was sitting on this panel as one of the speakers, and I had my eyes closed, and I was just telling the other panelists who were working on the energy, like, you don't have permission to work on me. Like, I'm very, very clear about my own protection mechanisms. And what was just a little shocking to me was that there was there was no checks and balances there in that moment. There was no permission. First of all, there was no permission. Okay, so there should have been a moment where someone on the panel or the moderator said, okay, at this time, we're about to do an activation. For anyone who wants an activation, stick around. If you do not want an activation, please leave. But people did not sign up for an activation. They signed up for a panel about the Galactic Federation. And first of all, that was like the first thing. And then, like, there weren't any sort of closing or grounding practices. So it's like, how irresponsible is it to then open up all these stargates and chakras on everyone and then say, bye, have a great weekend? I mean, it is a bonanza feast for all of the entities or parasites or whoever that's lingering that just want to attach. And so I'm just sitting there thinking, um, we are supposed to be the experts. We are supposed to be the ones helping this audience. And I know that everyone was so excited to share their light language and share their gifts. And I know that that came from such an authentic place of wanting to share their gifts. And none of it was bad or wrong, but the permissions weren't there. The grounding wasn't there. The discernment wasn't there. And for me, it was just a little shocking that I'm one of the youngest ones on this panel, and yet these checks and balances they're not happening. And so it just goes to show that no matter your age, if you're just stepping into this field and you're like, I just want to share all my gifts without going through duality, without experiencing the darkness, without knowing how dangerous energy work can really be, it's just a little not immature, but like it just feels like it's a little scary for me to witness that and to say, we now have a platform like the internet, and the second someone opens up their channeling gifts, they are going online and they're sharing it with the world. And if they don't have their own checks and balances and discernment, and no one else does who's watching, it's just like we are about to go into a lot of false light, a lot of false prophets, a lot of like sort of cult-like energies moving into the next decade. And that's okay. I've come to terms with it because people will find the people, whether they're aligned and authentic or not, they will find the people that they need to hear from and learn from and experience from. And everyone is a part of this grand tapestry. And I have learned to really actually appreciate the ones who are misguided just as much as the ones who are divinely guided, because they're all a part of what we need to learn, that expediting the process of learning discernment and duality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so someone comes to you,
Yeah.
and they're asking that same question you were asking at 14, 15, 16. Why am I here on this planet? Elizabeth, tell me. I just want to know. What would you tell them?
Okay. So, I mean, the first thing is that everyone right now, no matter how awakened you are, no matter what labels or categories or attachments you have, you're here for a reason. This is such a significant time to be alive. You are here to make an impact. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you all of a sudden have to quit your day job and go be some spiritual teacher. It doesn't have to be that impact, because you can carry light, you can carry knowledge, you can carry unconditional love frequencies with you, and you can be a garbage man or a grocery bagger or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever that category is. Like, we need just as many people embedded within the old matrix system carrying the new frequencies, just as much as we need people exiting out of the old matrix system carrying the new frequencies. So, I mean, the most important thing is that you are here for a reason. There is a purpose for you. And a lot of the time, it's up to them to really understand and navigate through that purpose.
Hmm. Okay. In your book, You're Not Dying, Just Waking Up, you describe soul missions,
Yes.
right? And you talk about that I believe you say we all have a soul mission. Would you
Yep.
say that? Okay.
Yes.
And there were common types of soul missions: healer,
Mhm.
grid worker, pillar, teacher, rebel, light warrior, and satellite.
Mhm.
Would you mind just walking us through, like, why is it important to know our soul mission? How do we figure it out? And maybe walk us through those few
Mhm.
types. Was that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, so essentially, like when you come to this planet, when your soul decides to sign up for to be a human, you choose a contract, right? Like, and so every pretty much physical human lifetime has that thread of the blueprint or the contract that you signed up for, your soul contract for planet Earth. Um, so the healer, for example, maybe in one lifetime you're a nurse. Maybe in one lifetime you're a herbalist. Maybe in another lifetime you are just an energy healer, right? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be energy work. You could heal in many different ways. The rebel, I really love this role. I've been this before. You show up in a lifetime and you push against the system, right? So you are the one that's, stirring things up, or you're rioting on the streets, or you're yelling from your soapbox and you're telling people to wake up and shake up the system and tear it down. So the rebel is always the one like on the front lines of the fighting. And I love that, because we need those two. We need the people to stand up and say no. And then what else? The satellite. So this is someone who is essentially a sender and receiver of information. So physically, they don't usually have a really big, like, physical impact on planet Earth. But what they don't know is usually at night, they're downloading a ton of information, whether it be from the consciousness grid of the planet or just source frequency in the universe. And then they're here living on planet Earth to anchor in that frequency. So that's a really incredible one. The pillar is sort of similar to the satellite in the way that usually these are very strong, more divine masculine, logical, analytical individuals who help to ground the other individuals who are very like out of body, ungrounded. So what I find is a lot of healers or a lot of teachers or a lot of satellites or even rebels are with a pillar to help them anchor. So romantically, their husband or their partner is a pillar. And so it's a much more quiet role, but also very important. And yeah, and then the teacher, I mean, kind of speaks for itself, someone who is just, no matter if you're a kindergarten teacher or a spiritual teacher, you just love learning and then giving that knowledge and information. So, I overview a couple of these in the book. Now, there are two new ones that have come through in the past 2 years since I've released the book, which are important to note. Actually, there's three new ones. One is the connector. There's not a lot of them, but man, these people, they are always working. You might be a connector. They're always working behind the scenes, and they see things so clearly. Like, they are the big picture observers, and they know what pieces of the puzzle fit with the other, and they just connect people together. They connect energies, they connect knowledge together to help complete that picture. Connectors, so profound, such an important role, and one that, once again, is always behind the scenes. Like, they're never on stage, right? And then the other one too is the connector, the key holder. So these are very, very rare, but also very significant. These are individuals, once again, who feel like they came here for a reason, who feel like they have a purpose, but every time they try and go down a different path or switch up their job or start a different modality, they get stuck, they get stopped. They're actually prevented from moving forward in that way because they hold these keys of knowledge, wisdom, really like they hold these light codes to them. And at a certain point in time, the planet is going to be at a place where that key of knowledge and wisdom is needed. And then essentially that unlocks within them and then gifts the planet that knowledge and information. So same thing, like these people are just going to be frustrated because they don't feel like they have a clear mission because they're holding these light codes and these keys. A lot of the time when the key does get unlocked, they will have the inkling of knowledge. If they're very conscious, they'll have the full insight on the knowledge that they were holding, which is really cool. And then last but not least, and there are way more of these than the other two, which is the retired starseed, is what I call them. So these are individuals who are, first of all, just tired. And they feel like they've been waiting for a lifetime, but in fact, they've been waiting many, many lifetimes. So I find that these souls are some of the original galactic volunteers from off planet. So they came here during Lemuria and ancient Atlantis, and they're like, okay, like we're here to fight for planet Earth. We're here to like, give whatever we have to give. And in lifetime after lifetime, then the downfall, and then we go into the medieval times, and it's just so much suffering, so much poverty, so much sickness and illness. Just truly the dark ages. And every single life they've been holding it and trying to push through and trying to wake people up and help people and heal people. And so they've been working nonstop every single lifetime. Then they get to this one, and their contracts are done. And their guides are like, okay, great, you've already given enough. And they're like, no, it's more comfortable for me to have a mission, to have a clear path, and to continue to give. And typically retired starseeds deal with a lot of karmic stuff at the beginning of their life, and also a lot of health crises as well, because they are forced into a position where they can't give anymore, and they are forced to receive. So there's quite a few of these retired starseeds that are not meant to necessarily do anything more. They're meant to just enjoy their human lives and finally receive.
Talk to me about grid worker and light warrior.
Mhm.
I want to hear about those as well.
Yep. So grid worker is someone who these people really love to travel. So typically they'll be huge travelers, and they end up, whether consciously or subconsciously, end up going to different locations on planet Earth that have portals, usually inactive portals. And just by being there, they will activate a portal or activate the grid lines as they travel the world. And a lot of these people that I've met are very consciously aware that they're a grid worker. So they will grid the planet. They will go around, plant crystals, those sort of things. And we need that. We need to reawaken the consciousness grid on planet Earth. And then the light worker, these are individuals, same thing, like they could sort of just really embed themselves within the matrix. They don't actually have to be very aware of their job or position. These individuals are most active at night, the light worker or light warrior. And essentially, they are actively in astral battles quite often. And so, these people will wake up exhausted, and they're like, I don't know what was going on last night, but it was pretty wild. And so they're really called into the astral realms to do work, but their soul needed to be planted here to anchor in those frequencies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you start developing these gifts early on of, would you call it remote viewing or astral travel or both, or how would you
Yeah,
define it?
definitely. I mean, I think remote viewing is more of a like anchored term,
Mhm.
but I kind of interchange both of those terms.
Gotcha. At what point does the Galactic Federation of Light come into your story? Talk us through
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So, so like I said, when I was 18, um, I ended up getting abducted. I went away to a 10-day silent meditation retreat called Vipassana. It was something that I had done in a past life that I saw myself. So I wanted to re-experience that in this life. And of course, this is a silent meditation retreat. So we are in the middle of nowhere. No one is talking. Great place to abduct someone. So I was abducted while
When
I
you
was
say
there.
abducted,
Yeah.
your consciousness is abducted, your physical body is abducted.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happened?
It was a full physical abduction. So it was around 3 a.m. And I woke up. You know how you're in a new place and you kind of forget where you are at first. So I woke up. I was like sort of delirious. I'm like, where even am I? And there was a being standing over me. I thought it was my boyfriend at the time because once again I was confused about where I was. And then just like that, I saw this sort of head lingering over me, and then I was being taken from my room. There was three of them, one on my left foot, one on my left arm, and then one on my right arm. And I could see my right leg just sort of dangling. They took me into the hallway of this meditation retreat center. And the only part I don't consciously remember is how we got from the hallway to their ship. So, you kind of imagine like if you're getting beamed up, I would be aware of like going through the ceiling or rising up, but I wasn't aware of that, which is still confusing to me. I couldn't talk, I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do anything. I was pretty much paralyzed, but I had my eyes open and I was fully consciously aware. Now, at this point in time, I was lucid dreaming, which I think helped me be consciously aware of everything. Um, and so then they brought me up on the ship. They put me into a chair. There was about 6 to maybe even 8 of them standing in front of me. They were super tall, around 7 feet tall, very pale. Like their skin was so like pale and almost thin. It almost felt like I could see right through their skin. They had hair. It was like white and kind of scraggly. They had small red eyes and just like smaller features, but they were not like a pleasant species. This was not a Galactic Federation encounter. This was definitely like just, yeah, like they just wanted to track me. There was like a machine off to my right, and then a being who I felt was kind of like the doctor. There was no telepathic communication whatsoever, and they put something into my right ear. I couldn't move, but I could see something in my periphery go into my right ear. And then just like that, they put me down back into my bed at this meditation retreat place. And then I was still paralyzed for about 30 minutes ish. And I knew what time it was because I basically got up and turned on my phone to be like, what time is it? What's going on? And then I went up to my ear and my ear was bleeding, which was an indication for me that yes, they had indeed done something or put something in there. And then I felt fully tracked. Like I felt like they were watching me from the second that happened. Once again, I was getting out of my body. I was remote viewing. I was doing a lot of things. And I felt like I didn't know what their intentions were. So I also had never even contemplated aliens before. So it was very new to me. I thought if I got out of my body, they were going to snatch it. Like I thought they were maybe body snatchers. I don't know. So I had shut down my abilities at that point. Anyway, went to a medical medium. I said, I don't know what you do. I don't really believe in what you do, but like, please scan me and like tell me what's going on. Something weird's happening. And she's like, oh, yeah, you have an implant in your right ear and it looks like you were abducted about a month ago. And I'm like, what? And she like just nailed it. Anyway, she said that they were more curious about who I was. Like, she described it as like beings from the sky looking down, seeing this like shining white light, and they were very curious why a human had such a high frequency. And so that's why they took me. They were just curious. They were just tracking me. Essentially, this thing was tracking, she was saying my heartbeat or my frequency levels or whatever. Anyway, so she removed it. And I was like, okay, cool. You're going to put something in my ear and remove this thing. Like maybe I could take it to a laboratory. And she's like, no, essentially she like not deprogrammed it, but she like dislodged it. She said it was like intelligent, but made of organic material. And she said it's no longer active. And I kind of didn't believe her, even though she was pretty spot on. And then for the next 3 months, my right ear started draining this like really gross, like sort of weird liquid, dark matter. I don't know. Anyway, so I guess it just sort of melted out of me and I actually didn't feel tracked anymore. And then it was about a month or two after that. So about 3 months after that initial abduction, physical abduction, where a Pleiadian being came to me. So I was hanging out middle of the day, hanging out with my friends in my student apartment. And I started feeling really lightheaded, really ungrounded. And so I said, to my friends, I'm like, hey guys, like, I'm just going to go lay down. Like, I'm not really feeling great all of a sudden. So I go into my room, close the door, sit down, close my eyes, like sort of just trying to ground and like, and then all of a sudden, as I close my eyes, this 7 foot tall, basically a male, good looking male being emerges from the corner of my room. And he tells me, like, I'm a Pleiadian and there's a meeting that you need to attend. And I said, what? And I just remember because I was remote viewing, but I'd never seen like another astral body. So I was like very confused. So like I opened my eyes and he wasn't there. Then I closed my eyes and he was there. So I was just like blinking at him for a while, just like very confused. And it was my third eye, right? So I could see him with my third eye, but not with my physical eyes. And so he said, in 2 days' time, December 21st, 2011, we are having a meeting and you need to attend this meeting. And it'll be 2 a.m. or whatever, 4 a.m. your time, which was Eastern Standard. And so I said, okay. So yeah, I think it was 2 a.m. So at 1 a.m., that night, 2 days later, I chug a coffee. I'm meditating for about an hour. And I didn't know, are they going to abduct me, like physically abduct me? Is it going to be astral? Like I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. And it was astral. So same being came back into my room. I'm meditating. I'm sitting there. I'm waiting for him. And he said, okay, follow me. And I knew at that time it was going to be an astral. So, and then we went off planet, which was my first time ever remote viewing off planet, which was so crazy. And then we went to the moon, but we didn't just go onto the moon, we went inside the moon. And then that's when I was there with my very first, very conscious, and I'm very grateful I was conscious for the whole meeting. Galactic Federation meeting with all of the beings, and they gave us the lowdown on the big shift. They also talked about this potential, like basically blast of energy knocking out our electrical grid and putting us into darkness, but that's a beautiful thing. Like they gave us the lowdown on everything. And there were other humans there. There were like probably potentially like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other humans. I could tell because I could see their astral body and then I could see their grounding cord leading back to planet Earth, just like mine. So not only were we there from Earth, but then there were many extraterrestrials there too that I was like sort of creeping around looking at. Because first of all, I just never even knew aliens existed 3 months prior. And now I'm in a room full of hundreds of thousands of them. And I thought it was like, looking back, I'm like, that was pretty rude of me to go right up to them, to, like just looking at them like, wow, like you look weird or whatever. So that was my like real big introduction to that organization. And they called themselves the Galactic Federation of Light. And once again, like being on this panel at the Conscious Life Expo, I was like just amazed that there's 8 people, 8 panelists all sitting here talking about the Galactic Federation of Light, when 10 years ago, no one was talking about the Galactic Federation of Light. And now there's 8 experts on it. Like it really just blew my mind that it is not necessarily mainstream because it's not quite yet, but it's getting there. And it's just wild having so many others with us on this journey.
My goodness. So you have this experience. How does this change your life from that day forward? How do you now, you've been remote viewing, but now all of a sudden you're hanging out with extraterrestrials and this Galactic Federation of Light. Like, how did you move forward? Did you go, man, I got to go back. Want to go back there every day, or
Yeah.
what did you do?
Yeah, so moving forward, I had so many questions. All my questions that I had when I was 16, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What's the purpose? Like, who are humans? All of that. I went back to this Pleiadian man who now I understand as Kinetic is his name, and he works with the Pleiadian Security Council for planet Earth, so Earthly Matters. And he answered all of my questions. He was so just kind and open and loving. And, just my human was just so like needing all of the answers. So I would see him, weekly. And then it sort of, after a lot of my questions were answered, it would be monthly. Now, keep in mind that this was 2010 where I really reopened, 2011 where I got abducted and then met the Galactic Federation. And then it wasn't until 2016 where I even got online, started talking about this stuff. So I had a solid 5-6 years to really process and navigate and, just work through all of this information. And I would start documenting the information as well, just in sort of journal entries. But yeah, so that's sort of what I did moving forward was I just wanted to know everything there was to know that my curious mind wanted to know at least.
Hmm. So you're doing this by dropping into a trance-like state.
Yep.
You're then connecting with individuals, entities that are coming your way.
hmm
You mentioned kinetic, which I know that you now have information that's flowing from this entity that you share on your platform. How would you describe your unique way of communicating these truths, these messages? Is it channeling? Is it remote viewing and then communicating the information? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, so mostly it's me getting outside of my body. So I put myself into a trance-like state. At first, like if I was hungry or if it was too cold or if my back started hurting or whatever, like I would be thrown back into my body. So I had to learn throughout many years how to separate my physical sensations from my conscious awareness, which obviously really helped. And so, yeah, trance-like state, getting out of my body. And then
How
for
fast can
me,
you do that now?
oh, now it's seconds. I mean, I could sometimes like, you know, there will be a lot of physical distractions and I can still do it. However, I will say since having my son, it's like if I can hear him screaming in the background, I just start sweating because I'm like, "Oh my god, I cannot focus right now." So sometimes like people will notice like, "Wow, that took you a little bit longer." I'm like, "Yep, I could hear my son. Like, is he being
Mm,
fed?" Like, it's just like the human
of
things.
course.
Um but other than that, it takes me literally seconds to get out. Before it took me up to an hour, hour and a half to remove myself from my body, let go of all of my preconceived notions, cut my cords, ask my question, receive that. And I will say, when I first started talking to these extraterrestrials, they would give me information in like really complex poetry. Like it literally sounded like they were speaking in riddles, and I'm like, how is this an answer to my question? And I also started to know that because of the law of non intervention, you have to ask a very specific question and they cannot give you information outside of the question that you ask. So it's also about how artfully you're asking the question to receive the information and the insight. So sometimes I'll have to ask them 5 different ways in order to get the answer or at least the full picture that I'm looking for. Nowadays, I've been able to translate them really simply, let's say, into my own language. So before it would be these complex riddles that I would get and I'd be very confused and overwhelmed. And then I would start to ask them, like, can you speak more, like, casually, like just like, and so now we've got a translation down pat, but that took quite a while too to sort of figure out the translation appropriately. And so now I'll remote view over to their Galactic Federation mothership, and it'll be like part remote viewing, which is getting out of my body and going to a physical location. And then you add in the clairvoyance of like, I can see the room that they're in, I can see what the being looks like. And then it's telepathy, or in remote viewing terms, it's called DMP or deep mind probe. And so then I will have a telepathic conversation with them and ask them questions. Sometimes they will give me words back, and sometimes they will give me images back. And it kind of looks like a holographic sort of holographic image that they can pop up to better describe their answers.
And are you providing this, or have you provided it more of like a one-on-one service for individuals who are trying to find, wisdom in their life? Or is it more about communicating the direction of the planet and what's going on
hmm
energetically?
Yeah. So, I mean, for a decade at least, like long before I was online, I was doing past life regressions with clients. So I had
Hmm.
clients that were past life regression clients. And then it moved over to like just everything, your aura, your chakras, your soul mission, your Akashic records, your cosmic connections, your all of that, your blocks, your traumas, your, soul wounds, like all of that I could see. And so I was working nonstop. I was doing a double major in university. I double majored in political science and communications. I wanted to be a politician. I'm so glad I was not. But yeah, I ended up graduating with honors. But as I was doing that school full time, I started up my own practice. And this is where I started working one on one with clients in person. I was able to get an office and all of that, which was awesome. And then it was about a decade of doing that. And I just ended one-on-one sessions in 2021 or 2022, I believe, mostly because I only have so much time and energy, and it takes a lot of focus, a lot of energy to channel. Like, I always equate 1 hour of channeling to 3 hours of any other work, manual labor, or whatever that you could do. It just takes a lot of focus, right? It
Mhm.
really, it gives me headaches, right? So I thought to myself, if I spend 1 hour with one person or 1 hour with 10 people, and
Right.
now 1 hour with 50,000 people, I mean, it's just a no brainer for me in the impact that I can make. However, I really do love my one on ones. Within my membership, my community, I do coaching calls where I pull people up on a live Zoom and I'll channel their information on the spot,
Mhm.
just in that moment. And so that still gives me a connection to one on one people. But then there's other people who are observing that information and can also glean insights and gain access to information just even through observing that channeling. So I
Mhm.
still do it just at a different capacity.
Mhm. Obviously, in order to cultivate the innate intuitive abilities that we have, it's a long path. It's, a lot of training and experiences such as you've had. But if you were to give someone some encouragement or advice on them developing their own
Mhm.
intuitive abilities,
Yeah.
what would that encouragement or advice be?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, everyone needs to know that you are psychic, you're a remote viewer, whatever your labels are, medium, whatever those labels are, you're all of it, right? Like, we are souls in a physical vessel, and our souls come first. So tapping into the fifth dimension, tapping into energy, tapping into consciousness, that's easy. What is very difficult to do is tapping out of the third dimension, right? So the only thing that disconnects us from every single piece of information the universe has to offer is our focus. And every aspect of our reality is a distraction. So what do you choose to focus on? That's why meditation is like such an eye roll, because you're like, oh, just meditate more, breathe into it, right? But also, meditation gives you the space, right? It anchors in that hour or that 30 minutes to do nothing other than just to listen. And that's all we need, right? All we need is conscious awareness. So letting go of the distractions and the focus in other areas of your life and giving yourself the moment could be while you're driving or stuck in traffic. I channel the best when I'm stuck in traffic because I've got my autopilot programming, but then I also have my conscious awareness online, right? I also channel the best in a shower. Take a shower, connect with water, and just listen to your thoughts, let them go, and see what else is there, right? So it really does, it's based on your conscious awareness. Give yourself the space to listen, and that's going to really lead you to all of those insights. And then one more thing on top of that, if you are looking to raise your frequency, which obviously as you do, you connect to more information and consciousness, utilize gratitude and like appreciation, right? So the second we can find gratitude in our lives, we're increasing our vibration. So maybe you go to work every day and you're like, I hate my job. I'm not getting paid enough. My boss undermines me, or what have you, right? You've got all these things that are negative. But what does your job do? It helps you pay the bills. Fantastic. Focus on the one little seed of gratitude in a dark situation and just focus on that. And every other aspect of that dynamic is going to shift into a higher frequency because you're focusing on a higher frequency, right? Whatever you focus on is going to be amplified. So that's what I recommend is give yourself time to focus on things that are not earthly and human, and then also raise your frequency through gratitude and appreciation.
Beautiful. Well, I've got about 50 more questions, so I'm going to put those to the side. And I'm excited to point people to your social media, your Instagram, elizabeth.april, and of your website, elizabethapril.com. Your membership program, you have a 7-day free trial that I really want to encourage people to check out. I have signed up for it and get access to a bazillion videos. What do they get with the membership, and what would be who would be the person that would be a best fit for?
For sure. So, someone who's really questioning and looking for answers, I mean, You know, I'm very well-rounded in my approach on what I look into. So whether it be aliens or soul mission or conspiracies, like you name it, it's
Kate
on.
Middleton.
Yeah, Kate Middleton. Yeah, it's on the website. So it's just like the videos are great. And then every single month, all of the members get access to one live Q&A. So you get to ask your questions live, and then I'll answer them. And then also 2 of these coaching calls every single month. So on the first and third Sunday of every month, we do a live Zoom with all of the members. And I choose people intuitively, tap into their information, and then I do a group channel at the end, which is always just so mind-blowing and helpful for everyone involved. So they get that and like so many other things. We have a forum and people get to connect with each other, which is also really incredible. And if people are like, whoa, I'm not like a big video fan, that's okay. I highly recommend my first book. If you haven't already, it's You're Not Dying, You're Just Waking Up. And it really does just overview all of the symptoms of a spiritual awakening. And it's going to help sort of guide you into the right direction if you are feeling a little overwhelmed, a little anxious, a little restless, a little stuck. I think the book is a really great first place to land because when you go to the website, it's a lot of information and it's like, where do I even get started? The book is a great first step. And we do get weird by the end. We get quantum, we get soul mission, we get alien, we get starseed, we get DNA activations. But at the beginning, it's, yeah, okay, you're feeling stuck, you're feeling unhappy. Like, let me guide you through that. So that's what I recommend as well.
You can learn about your 5D memory in You're Not Dying, You're Just Waking Up. We'll definitely link to your book, your website, your social media accounts. All of that is in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can swipe up on your phone and find all of those links now. So Elizabeth, you're like a breath of cosmic galactic air that is flowing through, bringing light and peace and love. And thank you so much. You're just so delightful. Delightful is the best word. So I really appreciate your wisdom and willingness to share it with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. I think you're doing great work yourself, and it's so nice to be able to connect and collaborate.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.